Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. In tonight's episode, I would like to do something a bit different and to kind of go on a free flow satsang-ish vibe. And I felt like sharing, not per se with an intent of a specific outcome to the talk, but to just see what can I say about that which is watching the self that watches. What watches the self that watches? Clarity of an unspeakable cosmos. An episode long time coming. Not long time, like 2 days I've been thinking about this episode. The mind can be cast. The mind can be thrown. And the mind can become a throne. When we think about clarity, we are wondering what is truly in the room of our life. There are those who they cannot consider the room empty. There are those who cannot consider the room full. If we are to think of ourselves as energy, there is a non-dual truth at work. There are, you can say that let's treat the notion of consciousness as a mirror that has been shattered. And let's treat that every person is technically a mirror, as part of a mirror, that through each piece the truth is seen. So technically, we are all energetic phenomena, but the forms of our expression are different. So we are like a broken mirror of energy, that whatever is in front of the mirror becomes the conceptual truth. I have wondered about this in my personal life, that who is watching this? Who is watching this life? You know, I have found there's been moments I've cornered it to the ideology, the identity. There has been times where it can't have an identity, it's just a physical event, you know? But the thing about the watcher, that it watches your movement and your stillness. And I think that's where the clarity of an unspeakable cosmos is, because we seem to be confused about where we are as we speak. Do you see what I mean? The mind is watching the body beyond the subjects it sees in it. That means it's like when you think about Alexander Graham Bell inventing the telephone, on some level, that's an incredibly, excuse my language, holy shit moment for the universe. Where, just think about it, particles, meaningless particles, elements on the surface of the earth, do you know? They came to a complexity where all these particles, they came together just to be able to speak over the phone. Do you know? So technically, one person speaking to another is a complex set of cellular structures being intelligent enough to identify as something to even speak. From a materialistic perspective, you're only left with, the consciousness is a miracle. From the immaterial perspective, there could be other material dimensions. You can worship matter of a different kind. Do you know? Trust me, this universe is like a ship. You know what I mean? It's like a ship. And some people, they might see other ships. They're like, okay, why am I on this ship? Let me go to the other ship. But the whole point of it is to realize why you're on the ship. That is the joy of living. David in the chat section says, the one that watches you watches me. The one that watches me watches you. Yes. I feel, David, you're familiar with Vedanta and Vedanta non-duality. There's a saying in the Upanishads, it's so next level, where it's going one by one through the senses, where it says the seer of the seen is unseen. The seer of the seen is unseen. The hearer of what is heard is inaudible. That means there's a way attention is to the moment that is not necessarily ideological, identifiable. It's not you or me. It's literally energy and attention before the dance of conception emerges, So this self, it has been approached through different traditions. But to be honest, in this episode, guys, I'm just thinking really, if this was literally, who knows how long we're here, what is the significance, right? What is the value of knowing that there is something watching itself attributelessly, the change of its attributes? One, of course, we can take the Aristotelian route of the four lenses, see the four causes, or we can just kind of see it that it's something that we can't comprehend because we don't see enough of the room. There was an episode in this Next Level series, one of my favorite TV series. It was called Love, Death, and Robots, something like that. Poetic title. And in it, I think it was episode 18 something Rift, the Aquila Rift or something like that. In this episode, it was literally one of the most unique narratives I had seen, where pretty much it showed it's this sci-fi setting where this person's trying to get back to his family or whatever, but he comes to a space station and then at the end of it realizes the whole thing was a hallucination, and there's a sort of extraterrestrial kind of post-apocalyptic setting happening outside of the simulation. Right? So it was this kind of setting where it was as if like there was more dimensions to the world. Right now, where the human mind finds itself, I would say, in regards to its intellect, in regards to its psychology, is that we either look at the world or we look at the self, and meaning tends to be coming from these two sources. If meaning can come from not per se a self in a world or a world in a self. A world in a self is a belief. A self in a world is I don't know, we're like the finger of the cosmos, So really what I'm trying to get to, guys, is that it's just the nature of reality. Back in the day, they wondered, called it a dream. They're like, oh my God, his life is a dream. They were freaking out. Now people are like, oh my God, is this simulation? People are freaking out. In the future, I don't know. Oh my God, is it something else? They're going to freak out. You know, it's always been there due to the notion of man being a temporary creature, but his meaning being more collective and eternal than him, you know? That means, like, look at this picture. I think this picture is from somewhere in Turkey, maybe. And these heads, these are random giant heads. Do you know? Random giant heads. Like, what is it with this, with people on this earth making random giant heads? And what is the significance of it? It is to show that something was here. Because honestly, aside from building a building, I mean, when you want to look at a building, you're like, all right, the person who's making this building, they want to live in it, so there's a reason. But after they die, what happens to the building? So you see, due to matter being more around than thought, we have tried to communicate our minds through matter. I mean, literally, a human face made of rock is literally someone's mind in matter, literally. Now, guys, let's think about it in this way. For how long can someone watch the self? Like when you like if we were to go speak to someone like Papaji, Sri Ramana Maharshi, those old school traditional yogis, you know, they would kind of say like the human life is such a strange privilege that for eons you have been for. I mean, Papaji one day was blowing this person's mind. Where he was saying like you have been through 35 million incarnations, kid. You know, now you're in the human life, maybe pay attention a little, you know. And that's the implication of it, that there has been another sort of evolutionary structure. It's as if like our individual history is our singular dimensional life. Our universal history is our multidimensional mind, where there's no such thing as people, there's just waves. In our collective life, like I'll tell you, I mean, of course, this is entertain this notion, as Aristotle says, it's a sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. But I am telling you, there is literally a way of seeing all human life where we are part of a galactic signal, and there's other settings part of a different signal. And I don't want to say galactic like Star Trek or Star Wars. I mean, it's not like that. You know, it's literally attributelessness, but field like. So we are creatures that strangely are bestowed access to an invisible field. And we don't realize it. And I think, you know what the thing is? I think humans are, I think extraterrestrials, if they may be a potentiality of them being multidimensional, are living through human beings' eyes. What that means is we are like the sunglasses of the higher dimensions. The sunglasses is not the real sight. This is why, for me, when I see like there is like a lot of esoteric ideology you find just online and everywhere, you know, from stretching from ancient Egypt to modern times. Do you know what I see? I see beings who were not comfortable um, with space yet. That means we're all fearing death. Oh my God. Ah, no. You know, and of course it's a tragedy, of course. But at the same time, it's like, what can we do? It happens. So it's literally our identification with space and what happens to space after the identifier is no longer an object. So pretty much I thought if we can have an advanced civilization that is that is conscious, that it is observing objectivity, it is not just an object, it is conscious that it is observing subjectivity, it is not just a subject, then we will have a sort of witnessing state, like legit state, you know. It's like the imagine like the United States of witnessing states of being. It would literally be a species more fascinated from for the privilege of sight that the mind provides rather than the same old dance of the body. You see, the body is a brush. To me, it's like an instrument, really. You use it. You know, if you don't use it, you could carry your instrument your whole life not using it. You know, that's pretty much the potential of the human mind. You might not believe, in my youth, I felt a sort of karmic quarantine. And this sort of karmic quarantine was strange because it was an unauthorization of my own input, which there is this strange setting where for some beings, their youth is, they are pushed. I feel it's honestly like this. Some people in their youth, they're pulled. Literally, life is like, yeah, kid, keep going, keep winning. You're going to wake up later. And then there's some people who wake up early. Do you know? And their whole life no longer becomes based on running away from sorrow and running towards happiness like a, artificial robot. It becomes actually living the life of a human being, having the ability to experience multiple dimensions of how the human being is. You know? Imagine in the future we realized we were actually a collective being from the beginning, and individualism was a hallucination of this supreme field. Let's say we realized that. Then what would our fear be? Would our fear be a mirage in a mirage? What watches the self that watches is not an idea. Only when you communicate, move, pretty much when you make noise and move, you become a person. You become individual. If you remain purely still and you just fathomed as if you had never moved, you would see there would be no meaning. You see what I'm saying? So that which is watching the self, now different traditions have approached it differently. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share with you um, an algorithm from the past, and I'm going to then share an algorithm I've come up myself. The algorithm for discovering the nature of the ultimate witness from the yogic perspective is and can be really nothing else aside from self-inquiry. That means you may not be able to say, whoa, why is the world here? Because the world is not in the jurisdiction of your free will. But you as a human being can ask why you are here, why your part of this universal sector is occurring, why your eyes are attending this event of motion, of matter, of forces in nature. So pretty much from the yogic path, whoever you are, whatever walk or phase of life you are, and pretty much this should be some of these talks I give. They shouldn't be for super young children, to be honest. Like what I'm talking to human beings who they have actually realized the nature of the objective realm. Do you know? That means if you're too young, oh, I don't know who's listening to this, but like whoever in the world who's listening to these talks who's too young, the whole point of it is you go get a sense of what life is, and then questions arise naturally. You know? Yeah. So, anyways, pretty much the whole notion is that if energy cannot be created or destroyed, and let's say energy consciousness, let's not say consciousness, but awareness was an energy, your mind wasn't a mind, it was just energy itself. So if mind is energy that can't be created or destroyed, you can say it's like mind is the same. The person has one mind, but then there's different modes of mind, or states of mind. That means, isn't it strange? We're saying there's different states of consciousness, even altered states of consciousness, but then we're treating people as if they're just what we see or the same thing that we've defined them as. So in a world where everything is changing, these creatures that name themselves identifying based on static existence are now like, oh my god, we're much faster than our atoms. There seems to be something watching itself as it is existing, right? So this unknown position of experiences is so tremendous, so significant to human psychology, that I can tell you, so many people, you can just see it in the signs of a person. If you're someone who others are more interesting to you than yourself, that means you're still trying to see what others see in themselves. But when you realize you have a self, when you realize your eyes are making an entrance on the stage for the first time, there comes a strange revivification of character. You revive. Literally, you know how like in a video game you respawn? Pretty much it's like the character, whatever happens to the archetype character. Now just think of the mind playing a sort of video game, endless respawning mind, because every day I wake up it's like a new kind of self, believe it or not. It's a new opening from the stillness and silence of the day towards the movement and noise. And it could be the case that we had to evolve our notion of time, but we made time such a concept, so strict and so specific, that people started exploring. This is why a lot of human intelligence, I feel, is being wasted. Um, to be honest, I mean, this could be a bit bold, me saying this, but I pretty much think human beings must live the life of their minds, not just the life of pleasurable embodiment. I mean, like I mean, if you were like a tree, sure, but because the person has limbs, because the person has a sort of ability, it's like the ability must be used. Imagine somebody went up to Tony Robbins, this motivational speaker, and imagine Tony Robbins suddenly picks some person from the crowd and is like, yeah, you. And the guy was super shy, and the guy came, and Tony Robbins looked at him, and everybody looked at him, and let's say this was like a Spider-Man universe. So it was actually Spider-Man who had come to a let's say, Tony Robbins, then featuring Tony Stark kind of, let's say, conference. So Tony Robbins would look at Spider-Man and be like, you serious, bro? You got this much power and ability and you can walk on buildings and you're in this motivational conference? It's like, what motivation do you need? Do you need the mirror to shout at you? Like the man in the mirror to shout at you? It's like, do you see what I mean? I think after you reach the experiential, a sort of experiential momentum and journeying through matter, then your life as space begins. Now, if the person can notice that who they are calling themselves as is the world simultaneously happening, as their identity is simultaneously happening, we will be left in the most coolest and mysterious phase of human evolution, where we are like, we're not objects, we're not subjects, then what? And that's where we currently are in the mystery stance. So right now, anybody who even attempts the question, the future generations will applaud you. Beyond language and through the non-dualism of instant experience, what remains? For me, I have my attention on geometry. I think there is a geometrical phase that we have to go through. And literally there's going to be, just like how we've had sort of prophetic figures for in regards to, let's say, I don't know, I wrote this down in something years ago. Pretty much I saw that there will be prophets to the Platonic solids. Certain human beings who have full wisdom of certain dimensions of the realm. Because for the first time, a multidimensional evolution of the whole structure is coming. You know what that would mean? In certain ancient texts, they say there were 7 skies. And what that would mean is, imagine there were 7 parallel realities of different kinds of earth simultaneously happening. And imagine now these civilizations, these parallel earths try to communicate. Even if you want to take metaphysics from a natural edge, it's literally seeing a creature on the earth and then literally fathoming for 1 millisecond, nanosecond, if the earth is a creature. What are the chances it is? What if it's a creature that the crust, the outside of it is inanimate, that what's really in the center of the planet is animate? You know? Because for now, there's no budget and funding that could dig a tunnel to the center of the earth. The world still stands a mystery. I'm telling you, this is a blessing. Right now, as I'm speaking, if I was to ask what is watching this self that is speaking, it is not those words and it's not the body, yet they are parts of the moment. And it's not that it's not the body and the language, it's just that the body and the language and the world are all contents of the whole moment. So I feel literally we may be attributeless spheres of energy simulating within ourselves human life. I believe it was in one of my science fiction works, or maybe it was in a talk, I brushed up on this chaotic idea, and this idea is not for the faint of heart, it's for the mystics of the realm. And for a second I thought, what if this planet is empty? There is no greenery, there is no wildlife. What if there is no sun? What if there is just like a bunch of spheres on the planet, and these spheres are intelligent beings and we are simulations inside them? Do you know? There was a time I thought, what if it could be like that? But then when you get to that level of what if, then everything could be a what if. There could be a what if to your what if, and then a what if to that what if. And at the end of it, you're like, oh my God, what if, what if none of this ever happened? You know, that the mind can definitely reverse engineer it as much as it engineers forward. I think if we have this approach that nobody actually believes anything, they have just they have engineered or reverse engineered to a certain phase of their inner landscape. Because you see, if you want to develop the life of the body, you know, young child at a young age needs to be hugged. Human beings need to have physical contact where they don't feel human and they do unhuman things. You know what I mean? But the whole issue is the human being has to also be decent to be able to have contact, because sometimes you have to take off the heavy helmet you have worn for so long, you know, and realize that as from this Japanese show Vinland Saga, you know, the true warrior doesn't need a weapon. The liberated mind doesn't need fear. It's like there's greater games to play. It's like the mind of the civilization has to advance now. So, Lauren, I have no idea what you're talking about. David, um, you say if there wasn't death, there would be no function to let go of the finite lens. It wouldn't be even finite. Yeah, there wouldn't. We wouldn't know we're temporary if we were eternal. You know, but because we know we're temporary, that's why the conviction kind of moves. So here's the thing. This means that most likely, I think this is the case, that it's a coin flip. Either we develop a new language or we develop silent languages because information has become more instantaneous. That means if one person's thoughts could instantly go into another person's thought the moment that thought was created, technically everybody would be having everybody's thoughts all the time in a collective cybernetic one mind, you know? So and by the way, guys, please, whoever's listening to this and engage with the chat, write what country you're listening from, like where in the world you're listening from. You know. Now I'm going to share with you. I shared with you the yogic approach, Sri Ramana Maharshi's approach. Um, I would also share something from Shri Nisargadatta, then I'll share my honest view of my route. Shri Ramana Maharshi, Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj, excuse me, Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj, this man was also a yogi and had a sort of insight on the non-dual self. And Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj says first the I am myself comes. Then the I am myself goes, leaves. Then the I am all comes. Then the I am all leaves. Then the I am comes. Then the I am leaves and nature is. So all of human life and our purpose could be just because we don't think we are natural. That could be the sign, that could be the whole urge that evolved us. We just stopped feeling like it was a millisecond emotion, you know? That's the ultimate towards nature. As a dual creature, you go towards the singular, void, and infinite. Now, Mr. Within's route, guys, my honest approach is that if it can be done in stillness and silence, it can be done at the extremes of movement and noise. So I feel that if the extreme of silence and stillness is where enlightenment is hiding in archaic thought, and in modern thought, what if it is at the edge of communication? What if we have to become louder? Do you know, what if people have to start communicating more and more? And even though we think it could be ignorance, but it could be the beginning of a totally new evolutionary leap, evolutionary route in history. A species that communicated itself out of the fear of its inner extinction, then efficiently advanced its outer civilization, its outer resources. Because honestly, we have to create a civilization where if in the future there is alien immigration, like extraterrestrials are living on our planet, we have to create it where it's actually we understand the value of the human being. You know, what if extraterrestrials come and they say we were here before you human beings, get out of Earth? You know, we would be like, we'd probably be like, you snooze, you lose. You know, really, that's the thing. Do we want an advanced human being? Do we want many of them? Do we want a healthy human bodies and healthy human minds? Do we want to actually try out empire of humanity, but it doesn't have an emperor? The idea of the emperor is a civilization that is advancing so fast it can't be fathomed. So we have made for the first time a human efficient kingdom, but it's not a person, it's an ideal. First, I feel that the person wants life to listen to them. But once the them, the you, the idea of you, you notice is changing all the time. What that means is literally not changing in like the person's identity is changing. It's just that, like, here's the thing: there's a watcher, then there is something being watched, and then there's a classification of what is being watched. And then there's again another level of identifying with the classification of what was watched first, which becomes on its own a second sight. So I feel we're tunneling through each experience. So literally the brain is literally the neurons firing up randomly, you know? It's literally like different geometrical patterns. The brain is like a geometrical engine, I feel, you know? It doesn't necessarily mean the geometry is in perfect symmetry. It just means that it's like something is lighting up in the middle of nothing, you know? So many religions care for the world, but they're all looking at what's coming after. So many people care for their families, but to be honest, they don't give a shit about their grandkids, great grandkids. They just care about their immediate family. And the reason is they have no choice, because how much can the person's energy go? Like, we are literally like an energy package, an energy container, and literally we're like a glass of water every day, and you put it in the sun and it evaporates. Now, instead of thinking the glass is empty or full, if you start from the beginning, it's as if you're experiencing it. I don't know, there's something very crucial about experience. It's like, I don't know how many people have woken up from a dream and wondered what was reality when they were in the dream. It was hidden. So I would say most likely, just like how in a dream, from the dream state, imagine inside the dream, you in a dream, and you woke up, right? So we know that in nature there is um, simulated revelation, or revelation through stepping out of simulations, maybe that's a better way of saying. So ultimately, guys, what I'm saying is that Mr. Within's view towards the modern, let's say, neo-enlightenment, is that don't fear communication, don't fear being alive, just realize that there's 8 billion creatures that are also living through their own inner realms first, and then we gotta open up to our outer realms. That means once the person cares for their civilization, like how their civilization stands, then they will stand properly in their civilization, you know? Think of bubbles when a glass kettle, imagine, one of those electric kettles. Imagine when they boil, those bubbles arise out of nowhere when the temperature rises. And right now, human consciousness is opening its eyes every day. Endless new human beings arising. It's honestly like a massive performance. Being a part of a species, you're just performing, you're in your part, and it's like you are walking on a stage that many have walked way before you. That's what it feels like. At first the person thinks that you can have a glory that's alone. But then you see what glory. No, there is no philosopher who has been in an ivory tower too long and has suddenly realized the simplicity of life, has access to the dimensions of love and beauty. That means if somebody asked me if you had a choice between spending your whole life going towards philosophy or having love in your life, I'd say love, because philosophy will after some point become like how long can you stare at a mystery? After some point, you have to fill this gap of life with your own poetry. There's nights where I think what I'm doing with these talks, I think it's righteous. There's nights where I feel sad. I feel sad for myself, but not as an idea, as just witnessing an emotion, do you know? And that sadness is not an individual failure. It's the sadness of that it will never be enough. Just the imperfection that many wise sayings have said. And for me, it's the strange thing. It's like, why does the vehicle have this extra option? It's like, imagine the mind has like, it's like a manual car. It has a bunch of gears, but you're only at the second gear and you think it only has two gears, a good and bad gear, But imagine there were so many other types of gears. It's just playful effort in the void, and you take it too seriously. You burden yourself with expectations that are, again, randomity's choice. That's why after you have learned from, you can say, the known body and the known mind, you will learn from the unknown body and the unknown mind. You will first learn from how the unknown moves the body, then you will learn from how the unknown moves the mind, then you will reach a point of the pure inseparability of the known and the unknown. And if anybody has just the exposure of just the mere experience of these states makes you suddenly realize that there's more to the picture. So that means, believe it or not, when I speak, I'm speaking to a future that is more collective than now. So technically, the future is probably looking at me. If the future was, let's say, timeless, imagine that in the future we've advanced as a species to such a caliber, to such a heightened peak, where we suddenly were witnessing life. This witness I'm speaking about, imagine it's the fifth dimension watching the fourth and the third. The three dimensions of space and the four dimensions of time. Now, this witness is beyond language, or we could even do something more next level. We can say, after the fourth dimension of time, there is the fifth dimension of language, and then there is the sixth dimension of the witness. Or maybe I would say something like this. I would say, because after language, there's geometry. So maybe I'd say it like there is. We have the three dimensions of space, four dimensions, the fourth dimension being time. That means if you went to your store, you had a store and you went to it twice, at two different, time would be the distinction between the physical dimension, the two different physical moments, right? So now I'm saying, let's say we see what time is, we see time and space, they're linguistic terms. So we would come and say that all language arises from the ideological self, which really begins when you're named as a person, so that we can say that language is the fifth dimension where the ego is. And then after the fifth dimension, so after the fourth dimension, I'm really straying away from scientific the lens, but I'm just saying, like, imagine we just entertain the notion that it's like the fifth dimension is language, and then the sixth dimension is geometry, and the seventh dimension is the actual witness. So technically, it's like the mystic was saying, who's the puppeteer of this, who's puppeteering these strings, and suddenly the witness realized that it was a puppet of a puppet of a puppet being puppeteered. You know, we're like those Russian dolls that are like endlessly within one another. They're each their own individual dimension, yet they are all the dimensions they encompass. Just like a person, they're not just their past, they're all the experiences they've had so far. I feel trust is really the teaching of dimensions that surpass duality. In duality, distrust can be a teaching, trust is also a teaching. Innovation, design, like right now, we are like an embodied creature with fingers, you know? And in Shintoism, in Japanese thought, they saw all matter as a vessel for souls, like this highway of souls. So it could be totally that we right now think an atom is lifeless, but an atom could be the incredibly lesser evolutionary stage of what one day will become, you know, a creature of its own. Imagine we were a mortal being, but we fathomed immortal psychology. Imagine we prepared for it. We were a civilization that wondered if we were eternal, what would the temporal look like? And if we were temporary, what would the eternal look like? Now, that has been given in the past, but the other side hasn't been given. That means we have all been a species totally based on fear. Now we are conscious of subjects and objects, so we can bypass fear. And it's not that we need to bypass all fears. Some fears, like you gotta fear the burning stove, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where you gotta fear. I mean, fear is there, but we can actually look beyond fear. And that's where conscious living begins. Because as long as you fear, you hold back. As long as you hold back, you don't feel natural. You know, it's from a temporal perspective, if life is an opportunity, all you can do is implement your effort, your energy. It's like we're just a rare opportunity in nature that you can direct energy and its speed for a certain time, so we can control the velocity of a certain phenomena of the earth. Let's just think of ourselves as so unknown that we don't know who we are, but we know what the earth is. So we know that the earth is here. I mean, technically we can say human beings are the hallucination of the planet, but they are a very physical hallucination of the planet. So what does that mean? That means eventually at some point in our history as human beings, we will have to confront the notion of the emergence of the, you can say, neo-human. I called it in one talk the galactician. The human being that is becoming inseparable from literally their galactic sector, their universal sector, pretty much the expression of wherever they are, you know? There's a story that was that came to my life as a sort of teaching. Like when I saw that story, I feel like it was pretty much like a complete alignment of my nature. The story is from this person named Rishi Vyasa, and I'm gonna go into a quote tunnel of his quotes. But Rishi Vyasa, he says this guy wrote 18 books on leaves back in the day, you know, on these giant leaves, and they were called the Puranas. They were about society and the enlightenment of civilization through certain metaphoric values. Like he was keeping certain archetypes alive in those books. And for the time he wrote them, it was like next level. Like you wrote them at a time where people were like, "Bro, you writing on leaves? We're all trying to find food," you know, like. So Rishi Vyasa writes intuitively driven. You know, he was a very, very liberated being, and so what he does is that he writes these 18 books, but he's not satisfied. He's not content, as if something's missing in his life after writing these 18 books. And the story says that an angel comes to Rishi Vyasa through human form and says to Rishi Vyasa, unless you write about your love for the truth of all that you see, you will not be satisfied. You will not be content, and this Aeonian solar sight of yours will not be satisfied. And for the first time, Rishi Vyasa forgets about an advanced civilization. Forgets about, in some sense, the notion of society's evolution. Pretty much the Puranas were just for the evolution of society. You know? He forgets all that and he just stands there alone with the universe as his own mind, you know? And that's how the Shri Bhagavatam was written, guys. Do you know? Like, it can't be like, at this point, it's not a spoiler anymore, you know? And that dialogue between an archer and God arose from this human being pretty much unleashing his last vision. That means you can say that was a kind of poetry of the unknown. Because it's like, we're human now. There could be a moment where we'll be like, holy shit, how was energy ever human? Like, why did nobody ask this? Why did nobody wonder about this? How is energy calling itself human, you know? And so then we realize the sort of a third-party dimension at work, the witness. So really, people are like, it's the concrete jungle. I'll say it like this. First there was the jungle, then there was the concrete jungle, then there was the linguistic jungle. Then there's gonna be the cyberspace jungle. Then the experience has had enough of jungles. Holy shit, we're gonna be somewhere else, you know. The inconceivable, literally, moves beyond the language threshold. That's why I'm joking. You can't say anything about it, you know. So really, treat your life as an eternal opportunity to be temporal, rather than a temporal opportunity to be eternal. You know? It's literally an eternal. It's like, imagine temporary beings get bored, they want to be eternal. Eternal beings get bored, they want to be temporary. The cycle goes on, guys. It goes. You know, it's like, here's a joke for eternal beings. One eternal being went to another eternal being, and it's like, you got the time, and they both started laughing, and their laughter never stopped. You know? Honestly, it's like, you care for yourself, but you see the world's missing from that picture. You care for the world, you see yourself is missing from that picture. You hover as the non-dual witness. You're like, there's no picture. Holy shit, how long is this going? You know, and then eventually you realize that it's like, when nature is, nature is. It's a recognition that nothing was wrong from the beginning. I'm telling you, you live a very pleasant life when you realize it was all okay. It's just man's mind that has expectations for the future he has not yet paved. So I would say speech is a luxury. Back in the day, you could say enlightenment was just like the guy that was being chased by a wild animal in the forest, and he was running his whole life, and for a second he could just catch his breath, sit down, look at the beautiful beauty of the forest, and then be like, holy shit, another wild animal, start running again. Until man started to build weapons and was like, holy shit, I'm an animal in this jungle too. And then civilization, the sparks of it began. You know, you could say it could be a strange rage that kind of led to evolution, where the animal just had enough. You know, it was like enough of something, you know, and it was a push of just self push, you can say. You know, an invisible, it was literally the urge before the urge to be. I think language gives us an opportunity. Language, oh my God, language gave us an opportunity, has given us an opportunity to entertain um, parallel probabilities of the same moment. There was this study, this psychology study, that said that because there's two brain hemispheres, it's like there's two selves in the brain. And so that in some sense the entertainment of the imagination, it's like, could be just like different parts of the brain playing with one another, moving between one another. But I'm saying the whole notion of the witness is that beyond duality there's ways that there is vision continuity, maybe not the continuity of movement, but the continuity of vision. So it could totally be the case that we are biological antennas and we receive the signal of life. That means right now, rather than you are listening to a person specifically speaking, maybe you're listening to a long evolutionary reception expression biomechanism. Do you know? That means like I cannot avoid the DNA. Like I've listened to too much Noam Chomsky to be ignorant of this, but like there, it is true that the genetics has a huge role, but the whole notion of free will being a mobility of the genetics in spontaneous ways literally means it's like we're trying to explain jello. You know, we're trying to explain jello through the platonic solids, through a language that's limited to the like to a solid specific thing, but it's like jello, you know. That means imagine there was an advanced alien civilization and they were peaceful and they were very nice, but they were jello. They were all like jello, right? Do you know? And so imagine their leader was shaking hands with our president, the leader of our, let's say, whatever, you know, of humanity. And the leader of humanity was like, oh my God, how do I shake hands with this like jello being, jello alien being? And so they had to take a photo. And for the first time, the president, like literally, like, I don't know, he would just, you know, put his hand in the jello and they would just take a photo. Who knew? We made contact with extraterrestrial pudding, you know? No, we would have to still honor. We would probably gift them with invisible humanoid kind of container suits, you know? But the mind, of course, it moves in different ways, you know? Sometimes I feel, can I ever stop being an animal? Like the body is like the sermon of the body is just survive. The body just wants to literally the physical. When I think about my physical evaluation of life, yeah, get to the next day. That's it, pretty much. You know, sort of on a very extreme, I would say, physical level of trying to wonder as a material being what's going on. But as an immaterial being, it's like, all right, so now I'm a physical being. What's the point of physical nature? Well, it's what physical nature can do, right? So we're looking at the use of something. So now human beings are wondering about their own use in a cosmos where they're like a candle lighting a little bit of it, you know, a little part of it. And so there has to be some sort of honesty. You know what that means? That means it's like if something's happening, the person says is they ask this guy, how are you so successful? He's like, I'm just honest, you know? He's like, that's the thing. You don't have to be something else because you're already being something as a human being. And so when I think about it, I mean, just it's like 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, telling themselves stories about what they know and what they don't know, and eventually all these creatures being just a little line sentence in the whole giant book that this history is going to be. And then there's going to be technologies that are going to make a lot of the problems we're fighting about obsolete, and so it all depends on the user of technology after some point. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, after some point, it becomes the scale of so many events that will happen on this planet. Like, I treat my own life as an event that's taking place, you know? An event that's important to attend the moment I wake up. It's important to any vehicle you drive to be aware of all the blind spots in the mirrors. So pretty much when you wake up in the morning, literally, like, think of literally as if, I mean, you see enough nature documentaries, you get the point. You see some animals, if you see birds, for example, I learned this honestly from birds. Like, if you see a bird, the bird just literally every like in a second moves its head left, right. It just moves its head in different angles spontaneously, holds it, spontaneously changes it, holds it, spontaneously changes it. And I notice and I ask myself, why isn't the human being having an alertness scan? Why isn't our attention like the bird? Why don't, like, honestly, animals have less of a mind than human beings, but their instincts are way more accurate in noticing what food is proper food, like smelling the food before eating it. Can you imagine, like, the movie Godfather, that scene where they're in the restaurant, instead, right before people eating the food, it was tradition, they had to smell the food, before they imagine every restaurant, everybody was smelling the food before eating it, you know? Literally, there was these half sphere, you can say glass, with a small opening, like for the like the nose of the person, on at the beginning of every meal in restaurants, so the person could smell the food before eating it. Imagine. The whole idea is that the more levels of suffering we surpass, the less suffering there is. It doesn't mean suffering. It doesn't necessarily mean less suffering it is, but it means the less inferior kind of suffering there is. That means it's like, I mean, honestly, everybody feels the temporal nature of life. Like, how can you not? Everything in nature has this sort of coming and going vibe to it, you know? And if you implement the free will, literally, like, making it super binary, energy, no effort, like, that's pretty much life. You are a fool until you notice something more and you're not a fool anymore. So if you as a human being just have endless endurance, it's like, how long can you remain a fool? And it really depends on what the being feels you deserve. That means you might look at your past and be like, I don't deserve my freedom. But what about your future self? Does your future self deserve freedom? And imagine your future self deserves so much freedom. You were like, oh my God, I'm going to give the future self freedom right now. you know? And that's the whole thing. In your inner realms, I'm very, I'm not a thought. I'm not a creature of language, you know? But in the outer realms, you use language, you communicate through language, you know. You need various documents to live in society. Like, you see, those are all important. But it's just that in the inner realm experience, when it comes to the true nature of the mind is the viewer of the object through the object. Now this viewer is wondering what its own nature is. So you can say a person wondering about enlightenment is like nature wondering about itself. This is why in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha at the end was like, oh my God, everybody's enlightened. The Buddha was like, no way. You know, everybody's enlightened from the beginning. Because the fact that there's a beginning and an end in the presence of such a massive happening, this this grand happening that is this life movement, like honestly for me it's just a privilege. Just the fact that the air isn't like I'm breathing right now is even a privilege to me. So this is why it kind of like makes the more fragile life becomes, the more you actually care for it, you know. That is the case. Now imagine we had a civilization that cared from the beginning. Imagine we had a sort of law, you know, that was this law of timeless compassion. That means we as a civilization had decided that why not? Let's be super unnecessary, like compassionate as an outcome. Do you know? And then eventually, I'm just saying, like, it's just nature. It's what's in front of you. If you keep seeing the same film or the same show, then your emotions are defined by it. People don't realize this. This is the whole thing about storytelling. That the character, if the person likes the character, whatever the character does, the person's going to be okay with. You know, I remember there was this show I would see. This was like 2010, 2011, 10. And it was this show where my whole fashion sense and everything was like, it was this show called Californication. Do you know? And my kind of, you know, savage young mind had kind of seen this show and was trying to emulate the main character. Do you know? And I could tell you it was as if like there was something there where just because I liked how something I saw happened, I wanted to be that, you know. But it was only like you know, honestly, like a year, like after 2011, something happened where I suddenly realized, whoa, 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 how have I been paying attention to the life outside of my eyes less than the life inside them, more than the life inside my eyes, behind my eyes. That means it became fascinating that we say we have minds, and when somebody does something that goes astray from normality's posh acceptance, it's like, what are we judging? Where are we judging? And we see void, 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 void. The unknown is roaring louder than any lion or lioness of knowledge. Because the only thing that really, not the only thing, but really it's like the very, you know, elephant in the room factor about the human being, it's our sophisticated use of language, our ability to notice art, our ability to wonder philosophical questions, and our trust to even wonder if a language can become an experiential abode. For in the Bhagavad Gita, there's this strange saying, and I'm going to say this because nowadays there's you know, I think maybe the ears of the New Age community might find these talks one day. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says if you worship a deity, you know, In the afterlife, that deity would conduct you. But if you go straight to the direct supreme truth, then there is no conducting of like the karmic branch of the person, by a deity. So the whole notion was like, if you care for truth, and truth has a simple and complex dimension, and you have cared for the simple dimension of truth, you go direct to the ultimate. But if you want truth to still be a complex puzzle piece to connect your, the desire gauges of your intellect, you will see the intellect is literally a tool. I'm telling you, we're going to notice that the mind doesn't need to find itself. It can't be anywhere where it is not there. The mind is where it exists. So that's the whole point, that if we human beings, there is a truth, it has to simultaneously exist where we are. Because our experience of existence is momentary, moment to moment to moment. So, Jordan Peterson, in one of his talks, he said, we discovered the future. And if we had to discover the future, we had to discover the future before we could write a sentence. You see? It's pretty much this fascinating thing where this sight, like a light in this darkness, has suddenly arose, and it's like, oh my God, am I a body right now? Am I a subject right now? Am I a part of a civilization right now? Am I on a rock in the middle of nowhere right now? Like, what do you see what I mean? Like, when I say in the middle of nowhere, guys, I'm not avoiding everything we know as a species. I'm just saying language feels to me literally like a discovery. What does that mean? Somebody discovered fire, sticks and stones, and then it became a situation where now it's like we discovered, no way, we could make an image, an inner symbol connect to a sound, or even an outer symbol, you know? So the design of language seems to be prior to humanoid. Prior to the word human, we were a silent civilization. Now we have come into a phase of it where we have the ignorance of language, and this is strangely a blessing of its own. But then I think it's going to come back to the silence. We're like a wave in the ocean that's being individual for a little while. What watches the self that watches? I can tell you emptiness doesn't have an idea, and everything can't be one idea. The unknown, the emergence of the pure unknown, and living with the event. That means abiding by the unknown event of the cosmos consciously is the ultimate. Now, through this abidance, I think there comes your inner realms change as well. Like, there's moments where I have had my inner realms consciously, like right now in this talk, I'm moving my inner realms. But there's moments where I just sit, or wherever, just throughout the day. That's why I'm saying we're like an antenna, where the inner realms suddenly animate. Somebody says something, I hear something, sometimes even me calculating, even when you're like opening a door, like your inner realms is wondering about what's outside, so it's like there's the whole thing, this whole relationship with the unknownness of how what is known now is going to unfold. So complete content, not complete, but I mean content, let's say adequate contentment with the unknown is enough. Don't fear the unknown. but also feel how real life is and use your discretion and intelligence, you know? Because when you pilot, you're responsible for your eyes. So when people become responsible for their eyes, but then realize by actually applying that responsibility and living a rhythmic sort of relationship, symbiosis with the Gaian mind, trust life, and maybe the universe shall trust you. You know, trust your outer realms, you might find trust in your inner realms. Trust your inner realms, you might find trust in your outer realms. You know, usually those people who experience failure, they have to trust their inner realms. Their outer realms, there's nothing there, right? So their inner realms have to move them. That means that person has fallen to the curb. Literally, their mind has to start making moves, you know, their inner realms. And so some person can suddenly be the opposite, do you know? Where their outer realms, they're actually at the peak of success, but now their inner realm has nothing to do because they've done everything, you know? Or sorry, I'll create a reverse, a different angle of it. I'll say, imagine someone who, I mean, I could see four types of this metaphor. Holy shit! But okay, the person lost in the outer realms, they were found in their inner realms. The person can be lost in their inner realms. That means they have no purpose in life, and suddenly somebody's like, "Hey, come and help," you know, and suddenly purpose has been added to their life, you know. You know, and that's the whole thing. There should be this constant theme that if human beings find no purpose to their inner realm, the outer realm, an advanced civilization needs assistance. You know, imagine we created a civilization as caring and compassionate as the human being has an ability to be. So for the first time, it's like the person could be like, okay, if I am walking alone, then the civilization at least sees me. If you know, the civilization, the whole structure, you know, an institution that cares for the human effort is not just saying, all right, we're just animals and it's like we have to be shepherded by laws that don't update. What is this? You know? We are the where did if you ask where law comes from, it comes from man's mind, right? Now when you ask where man's mind comes from, it comes from the world. So we need to look at the world, then we need to look at how we're looking at the world, and then it comes to a state of enough witnessing, now you implement. So you can't hover in potential too much. Do you know you will get pushed poetically back into the kinetic state, you know? Because as long as the body is here, at least the body keeps you on earth. The mind, perhaps it's the sky where the earth is spinning in. It is the dawn of a new age for philosophy, for all the arts, and for humanities. Why? Because the human nature, the definitions of human nature have not been satisfactory. That language for the first time in human history is not enough. And the civilization has to calculate the experiential journey and like kind of how we're all tourists and manifestation for a little while. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Actually, I said I'm going to go into a Rishi Vyasa quote tunnel. Let's check this out. Okay, guys. So I found some quotes from Vedvyasa. Let's just see like what kind of person this was. Vedvyasa says, the happiness which comes from long practice, which leads to the end of suffering, which at first is like poison, but at last like nectar, this kind of happiness arises from the serenity of one's own mind. Sorry guys, this was on mute and I was reading the Bhagavad Gita. So I guess we're gonna rewind, Like honestly, these talks have given me such preparation to step into an actual time machine. How many times I've had to rewind. Alright guys, I'm going to read this from the beginning because this was on mute and that was my mistake. So Vedvyasa says, I was going into a quote tunnel of Vedvyasa. And he says, the happiness which comes from the long practice which leads to the end of suffering, which at first is like poison, but at last like nectar, this kind of happiness arises from the serenity of one's own mind. Vedvyasa says, set the heart upon thy work, but never on its reward. Vedvyasa says, we behold what we are, and we are what we behold. Vedvyasa says, perform all work carefully, guided by compassion. Vedvyasa says, O Krishna, the mind is restless. Vedvyasa says, it is nature that causes all movement. Deluded by the ego, the fool harbors the perception that says, I did it. Vedvyasa says we're not cabin dwellers, born to a life cramped and confined. We are meant to explore, to seek, to push the limits of our potential as human beings. The world of the senses is just the base camp. We are meant to be as much at home in consciousness as the world of physical reality. The world of the senses is just a base camp. We're meant to be as much at home in consciousness as the world of physical reality. Yeah, we're making a big deal out of physical reality. We're literally making a big deal out of language, which is the immaterialistic superstition, and out of matter, which is just materialism. You know? So we're taking objects too seriously, and we're taking subjects too seriously, and in the middle of this we have to live as natural human beings who are, trying to make this, Earth 1.0. Then we go to Earth 2.0. Vedvyasa says selfish action imprisons the world. Act selflessly without any thought of personal profit. Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, that's the thing. When you act selflessly, your nature is moving the moment. When your nature is moving the moment, there is no karma because your nature is just nature. It's too simple to have karma. You're literally being too simple of a human being to have karma. Vedvyasa says if the radiance of 1,000 suns were to burst at once into the sky, that would be like the splendor of the mighty one. I am become death, the shatterer of worlds. Vedvyasa says reshape yourself through the power of your will. Never let yourself be degraded by self-will. Vedvyasa says the wise unify their consciousness and abandon attachment to the fruits of action. Yeah, we got to kind of build an advanced civilization without technically building one, Rishi Vyasa says we never really encounter the world. All we experience is our own nervous system. Well, that's it for my talks, guys. I guess there's nothing else to say. Who knew? It's my nervous system just talking here. Vedvyasa says lust, anger, and greed are the 3 doors to hell. Holy shit. Vedvyasa says when a person responds to the joys and sorrows of others as if they were his own, he has attained the highest state of spiritual union. I don't even think it's like a state of spiritual union. It's a state of spiritual honesty where you're like, okay, what does this civilization deserve? Does it deserve to just play games that have no value to the self or the world? Or is it meant to care for something? And right now, communication is the key. You know, every person, based on if you entertain the antenna notion, every person on the planet is a unique antenna. Just pick up a pen or a microphone or something and be honest and share your inner realms. Not share like as if don't go out shouting truth. You know, I in whatever dialogue I keep the linguistic. I treat the um, discourse, the dimension of discourse, separate to a dimension of life sensitivity to reality. You know, they're two different rooms. You know, and you might not believe it, but really, my whole life, it's the simple attention that is moving everything. That's the best way to sum it up. It's like we have a mind, inside a universal mind. And it's like how intelligently does the human species want to interact with its environment and surrounding? Because its intelligence can go so high to a point where it's inseparable. Literally, it doesn't matter what's in your whole moment. Everything is treated. You can perceive everything as your body. You know, literally every body, you know, in the moment is your nervous system. You could say, as Rishi Vyasa says. Rishi Vyasa says the true goal of action is knowledge of the self. Ved Vyasa says, before creation I alone was. There was no other existence of the nature of cause and effect different from me. After the creative cycle ends also, I alone exist. For this universe is also myself, and when everything is dissolved in its cause in pralaya, what remains is only myself. When everything is dissolved in its cause in pralaya in its primordialness, what remains is only myself. Rishi Vyasa says, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. We are made of our thoughts. We are molded by our thoughts. Rishi Vyasa says, oh sorry, this is this is somebody commenting on Rishi Vyasa. He says it was Vyasa's genius to take the whole great Mahabharata epic and see it as a metaphor for the perennial war between the forces of light and the forces of darkness in every human heart. Yeah, so he pretty much, you could totally see it's a book about the nature of, you see, some books their focus is to get to heaven. Some books are their focus is not that you need to go to heaven. It's that as you live in earth, earth is in heaven. As you live in earth properly, earth is heaven. Vedvyasa says there's more to life than the everyday experience of our senses. Yeah, there's also Mr.Within channel on YouTube. Beyond your sense. Rishi Vyasa says those established in self-realization control their senses instead of letting their senses control them. Yeah, that's right, guys. After some point, you tell your senses what to do. They don't tell you what to do. Oh man, I think I'm getting tired, guys. I'm becoming too playful for this talk. Ved Vyasa says pleasures conceived in the world of the senses have a beginning and an end and give birth to misery, Arjuna. That's really true, that if something is temporary, like imagine somebody worships a candle and the candle melts and they're like, holy shit, what was I worshipping? So really it becomes a situation where you're caring for something that is surpasses the temporal, you know. Rishi Vyasa says, seek refuge in the attitude of detachment and you will amass the wealth of spiritual awareness. Those who are motivated only by desire for the fruits of action are miserable, for they are constantly anxious about the results of what they do. When consciousness is unified, however, all weight and anxiety is left behind. There's no cause for worry, whether things go well or ill. That means that's right there in that sentence I see the aftermath of an advanced civilization, where we surpass and conquer as a species worry, where nobody has to worry. They can communicate their way out of situations, where they can somehow add dimensions. When I say add dimensions, that means you either stick with the old system or you create a new model. Sometimes if you can't get rid of the old system, but you can't leave it either, technically you have to entertain new dimensions in your inner realms. So when you can't, if you don't have freedom in your outer realms, you can have it in your inner realms. Do you know what I mean? In the inner realms, we're limitless, and it's not about indulging in the too much limitless freedom, savage freedom of the inner realms, or just, I don't want to say savage, but the unconditional freedom of the inner realms, or the conditional freedoms of the outer realms. It's now for the first time the human life has to be like a symphony of all the dimensions aligned like planets, that for the first time reminded the universe that it could not die to itself. I'll share this story before I end off, guys. I'll step out of that quote tunnel. I'll read this before I end off. The awakened sages call a person wise when all his undertakings are free from anxiety about results. All his selfish desires have been consumed in the fire of knowledge. The wise, ever satisfied, have abandoned all external supports. Their security is unaffected by the results of their action. Even while acting, they really do nothing at all. Free from expectations and from all sense of possession, with mind and body firmly controlled by the self. They do not incur sin by the performance of physical action. They live in freedom who have gone beyond the dualities of life. Competing with no one, they are alike in success and failure, and content with whatever comes to them. They are free. Without selfish attachment, their minds are fixed in knowledge. They perform all work in the spirit of service, and their karma is dissolved. Yeah, that's the evolution of the higher dimensions, being from joy becomes service, becomes the bodhisattvic joy. You know, that means it's a different kind of joy when um you are coming down from the mountain. Let's say you went to the top of a mountain, now you're coming down. There's a kind of satisfaction. There is a sort of after victory innate trust in the nature, you know? And actually, guys, I'm just going to read this quote and end off. Jim Morrison. The most important kind of freedom is to be what you really are. You trade in your reality for a role. You give up your ability to feel and in exchange put on a mask. Now this mask is the linguistic simulation, where our names exist in, our background stories, our just pretty much who we have been as a character stories exist in. And when we live a life as social creatures, it's literally a sort of co-creation between it's like literally the collision, like just like how the Andromeda and Milky Way galaxy are gonna intersect and collide in uh, I don't know, what is it, like 3 billion years, 4 billion years, something like that. Trillion years, I don't know, something like that. So it's gonna be something like that, where it's gonna be an intersection. We are right now an existential object subjectively or experiencing itself subjectively. And we think we know what's going on here. And people are fighting over beliefs and disbeliefs. It's ridiculous. You know, in this book I'm writing, it's still in the works, but in its title, it's a Civilization 2.0. And I'm speaking about 3 phases of human evolution. I'm not going to get into them now, but in one of those phases, the last phase is advancement beyond the language threshold. This will be a time where this concept, I think, out of all my ideas I have shared, the one idea that will linger the most, the longest, I think, I don't know, I could be wrong, but like, the idea I think is going to be realized to be the most important idea is the language threshold, where experience has reached the edge of this limits of the system it's using to define itself. You know, as Maximus from the movie Gladiator says, what we do in life echoes in eternity. Why not run towards an advanced civilization? Why not? Like, what argument can counter this argument that on a rock in the middle of nowhere, the best thing multidimensional beings can do is advance the nature of their communication. Their communication allows them to see things in different ways. Eventually they have more ways to connect, so it makes it less potential for war. As the communication and the mind of the civilization starts making chess moves, you know, suddenly the body of the civilization has to calibrate to the tendency of where the attention is going. So right now, it's a waiting game where a lot of beings are just waiting for this sort of rhythmic activation. Honestly, we're waiting to just, honestly, you know what it is? We are the pioneers of the advanced civilization. And anybody who moves towards this idea, the future generations will see you. Because right now, my comfort is existing in the comfort of all those human beings that changed civilization throughout history's walk. You know, through all the battles. Like, I think about it, sometimes it's mind-boggling. Just the fact that I'm alive, that my DNA out of all the ants, like all the human beings that have died on this earth, you know, a genetical line continued. Everybody's who's alive right now. It's like slow ant clap for your ancestors. They made it, you know. We started from the bottom of the ocean. Now we're here, you know. So, anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. I'll see you guys in the Discord server. Much blessings and us. And let me just actually, just for the sake of the image, just Google what these statues. I'm just Googling Turkish giant head statue. There we go. Mount Nemrut. This is Mount Nemrut. So it's a mountain. It's a unique mountain. It's in yeah, Turkey. Is a 2,134 meter high, 7,000 foot mountain in southeastern Turkey, notable for the summit where a number of large statues are erected around what is assumed to be a royal tomb from the 1st century BC. It is one of the highest peaks in the east of the Taurus Mountains. Wow, so it's like the tomb of some royalty at the top of a mountain. It was like, I want giant heads to look at people when they come to see my tomb. Yeah. But it's epic. It's an epic notion. It says the mountain lies, okay, ancient history. When the secluded, when the Seleucid Empire was defeated by the Romans in 190 BC at the Battle of Magnesia, it began to fall apart and new kingdoms were established on its territory by local authorities. Commagene, one of the Seleucid successor states, occupied a land between the Taurus Mountains and the Euphrates. The state of Commagene had a wide range of cultures, which left its leader from 62 BC to 38 BC, Antiochus Theos. Antiochus I Theos, to carry on a peculiar dynastic religious program, which included not only Greek and Iranian deities, but Antiochus and his family as well. Oh wow! This religious program was very possibly an attempt by Antiochus to unify his multi-ethnic kingdom and secure his dynasty's authority. Okay, so pretty much there was this, let's say, emperor, okay, this leader of a dynasty, okay, and he suddenly, there were the Greek gods, and there you can say there was the Persian gods at the time, do you know? There were these kind of mythologies, and this person, emperor, wanted to infuse himself with mythology. So it totally makes sense why he has giant heads. You know, he wanted to glorify, he wanted to connect himself to myth. Now here it's saying, because so Antiochus supported the cult as a propagator of happiness and salvation. Many of the ruins, okay, so it was a, you know, chill dude. Many of the ruins on Mount Nemrut are monuments of the imperial cult of Commagene. The most important area to the cult was the tomb of Antiochus, one which was decorated with colossal statues made of limestone. Although the imperial cult did not last long after Antiochus, several of its successors had their own tombs built on Mount Nemrut. For around half of the year, Mount Nemrut is covered in snow, the effect of which increases weathering, which statues made of which has in part caused the statues to fall in ruin. Okay, so they were way more precise statues, makes sense. Guys, check out these statues. They're like next level. Um, excuse me. So guys, I'm going to show you some of these pictures. And I think Terence McKenna should have definitely went to this mountain. Like anybody who knows who Terence McKenna is, you know? Oh my god, this picture's so small. Oh, there we go. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. You know, I shared these pictures. You know, they say now or never. And advanced civilization is also the same, you know. Namaste.